Hello everyone and welcome to our series of Learning to Code with P5. Today in this video, we will be working with images, which are basically another kind of objects. So let's see how we can use them and manipulate them to, do some more creative stuff. So let's get started. All right, so first things first, just make sure that you've remixed your project and given it a name. In my case, since we will be working with images, I've already named it, not very intuitive though. Also, just to give you guys an idea, we will be working with like 3 examples of images. So I've created different remixed projects so that we can work them on separate sketches. Before we begin, I just want to talk about like, if you have already watched objects strings that we covered last week, it's kind of similar, but in P5 reference page, you can find a lot of documentation around image as compared to strings. So we will be working with this one. And if you kind of go down here, you will also see, just like other objects, this image object also has some of its properties, which are like with height pixels, etc. And then there are also methods attached to it, right? So there are quite a few of them. Remember, these are just functions which are specific to that object. And if you can see here, we have quite a few of them. We will try to cover sort of a couple of methods or so, just to see how we can kind of manipulate our images with it, okay? So that's there. And always, if you are starting with something new, it's a good idea to kind of go back to the reference page and try to figure out how this works. So that way you can kind of learn a few more things. All right, again, because we are working with an image, first of all, we need to actually pull an image before we can load it into our sketch. And that's where our assets folder is really helpful. Just for this example, I've already put in an image inside here. So I just downloaded this image and I've uploaded it here. You can drag and drop, or you can actually go to upload an asset and then it will take you to the folder on your desktop. If you can see this already, there is a link attached to it. So I'm going to just copy it because we will be needing to use it. All right, so let's get started. First of all, we're going to create a variable. And we are calling it image as in like img. The reason is because image is something which already exists here in our P5 as a method. So you know how the naming convention works? We cannot like reuse this. So you can pick any variable, right? So we are just creating this variable to actually store the entire object in this, right? And if you remember from our last example, we have to make sure that our object, either we are working with a font file or we are working with any kind of image or sound file, it's a better idea to make sure that they're uploaded, they're loaded before the sketch begins. So that's why we are going to use this function preload. And then here I'm going to assign basically, and I'm going to point out with this load image function, right? So what it would do is basically inside here, within these quotes, I am going to put the file path, right? Again, remember, we are basically, since we have already uploaded our image in the asset folder, that means that it already resides on the server of Glitch. So I'm just going to paste that URL. You can always go and find it here, right? So we've already copied it. So these are similar things that we have done before. And they're sort of the same for our image as well. So now that we've created a variable, we've already, filled in and given a file name and the URL or a path basically to where actually go find that image that we want to talk about. And then we are going to start working with within our draw function. So first of all, let's say if we want to actually draw this image on our canvas to see how it works, there are different sort of ways how we can kind of go about it. First, what we will be doing is, again, going back to this method. This is where we will actually be able to call our object inside. So we'll give certain parameters. The first one is basically wherever the variable, that object is stored. So I'm calling that. And then second and third parameters are basically the X and Y position, right? So now this becomes our sort of an option one of actually seeing the image on, let's say in this case, top left corner, but then also the image is in its original size, right? So I haven't made changes to the size itself. Another way to actually try and work this out is, maybe let's just do this. Maybe let's try to go for another kind of option two. In this case, what we can do is, let me in fact just copy it. All right, so what else can we do with it? So another way to actually work with this is, we can add more parameters to it, just so that we can adjust the width and height of this image according to the canvas size. So what we can do here is, I'm going to put width and height. So if you know, width and height is basically for the canvas itself. So if you can see here, now that the image has been adjusted to this canvas size, right? What it works is that it has adjusted to canvas size, but then also, the image itself has been kind of skewed, right? Because the proportions are not the same, the ratios are not the same. So we have another way of kind of doing this, and let's just call it here. I'm leaving these as options so that you can always go back and see how we kind of worked around this. Maybe for our option 3, what we can do is not just adjust the size of the image, but we will also maintain ratio. Okay, so what we can do in this one is, and let me go back here. Maybe it's a good idea to go back and share in this one where we were talking about the properties and methods, right? So there are already properties attached to this objects, which is the image width and image height. So we can make actually use of them. So what we have to do is, we are going to use a variable where the image is stored, and then we are going to use the dot syntax, remember, and then we are going to put height next to it. So this becomes something like this, right? So now what it is doing is, again, if you see, I haven't changed the height yet, it's still taking up the canvas height. So what it is saying is that, okay, I am talking about the width of this image, right? So it's really pointing to that object. So let's just try and adjust this one to image width and image height. Now, technically, it's kind of the same sort of size, which was at 0, 0. But let's say if we want to kind of work around with it, I can kind of size it down. So what I'm saying is just, make it smaller 50%, right? So it's kind of, sort of scaled down in a way. So this way, it has at least maintained its ratio at the same time, but we were able to kind of control the size of it as well. One more thing that we can kind of work, or I would like you to know, is that, you know how we have ellipse mode and ellipse mode and rect mode? So we have something similar for image mode as well, where we can control if we want the image not to be having top left as the starting point. We can actually put center here as well. So that way, now if you can see, this is kind of already moved to the center. And maybe if we want to make it a bit more interactive, instead of putting the position as 0, 0, we can literally do mouse X and we can do mouse Y. Okay. So now if you look at this one, it kind of reminds us of that, that error that I don't know if you guys can relate to it or not on the PC or Windows, but it's some kind of like an interesting retro sort of an image. Secondly, maybe another thing that I would, let's say, talk about in this one is one of the methods here. There is another method which is called filter. So what we can do is we can literally filter out an image. This is, I'm just showing you as an option. So again, using the name of the variable where you've stored your object, I'm going to use the filter filter method. And then within those, there are certain kind of, if we go to this filter, we can see more examples. There are different kind of filters that we can apply to our image as well. So we will just try and pick some random one for now. maybe just grayscale it so it kind of works the same way. You can do, you know, whatever, invert threshold and whatnot. It might be a little bit jarring, but for now, in the, oh my God, it in the draw loop, you know, it kind of works like that. So let's just revert back to gray for now, if this is what you want to kind of experiment with. So I'm gonna comment it out for now. But yeah, so this is how it kind of works, how to actually use images, but then also attach some kind of methods to it. Also, one thing that I would like to kind of mention here is maybe if we go to the console, and then let me just clear this up and go to the actual, this one. Maybe if we put image here, unlike the one that we talked about in terms of the strings one, which started showing us just letters, so it was kind of a simple sort of, not simple enough, but it was relatively lesser amount of data. It has a lot of data attached to it. You can already see the height and the width of the image as well, but you can also see some pixels, which is an array, right? Pixels is where it's literally storing each and every pixel for the image with the number and everything. And if you want to make use of it, right now you can see that it's empty. We can actually, if we have to work with any kind of pixels and colors and everything later on, let's say if you want to kind of make use of it, it's there. If you can see, well, first of all, when I've added the dot structure, you can already see a lot of other properties and things have popped up, right? So here we have to make sure that we do load pixels. Once we do that, if we go back to our image, it should technically have all the pixels filled out. Okay, did I not do it right? So let me just put that again. So maybe load pixels. Let me see, wait. Right, so if you can see, all the pixels are now, if you can see the whole array of like numbers and everything, which is stored in this array as well for pixels. So if you want to work with pixels, make sure that you upload pixels first and use that method, and then you have it at your disposal to kind of work with it. So that's at least our first example. Now we're going to move on to our next one and then try to work with another image. So, and what we will try to do is just because we're working with images, we will be using another different image for all three examples, just to have fun. What we will do is we will take up row of pixels in this image, and then try to get the colors from them, and then try to create lines out of it, just to make our image. We are using our image, but making it a bit more abstract. So I've kept these things as similar. You already know that there is, we want it to be preloaded. I've already given it a variable, but here, of course, the link is changed because I'm using a different asset here, right? So you can always go back and get your URL. You can always upload the image here. So now it's already on the Glitz server, and I've given it access to the file path. We are going to start working in terms of how we can kind of go about it. So first of all, because we are talking about this whole row of pixels on the x-axis, we're going to start off with our for loop. Okay. And then we know how this structure works. So for let I is 0, we're going to say I is less than width, I plus plus. Okay, that we kind of understand because we are going one over the other. The thing with this one, in fact, I think I'm going to show something beforehand, and maybe it's a good idea for me to comment this out. Maybe it's a good idea to just see it being, let's just draw it first and then see how that kind of works. I'm going to refresh this. Okay. All right. So now if you can see, we can already see the image as well, but we also know that the image is quite big as compared to what our canvas size is. So if, let's say, even if we are going with the first row of colors that we are trying to get from this image, we will have to adjust the size according to the canvas as well. So, you know, map function is our friend for that. So we will kind of work with it as well. So let's kind of go back to our for loop and then start working from there. So because we need to, now that we know that, you know, our image size is bigger than the width, so that means that we need to map those things around, and we will put them, that mapped value in another variable so that we have access to it. So let's create this variable and call it the image X, because X is usually, you know, when we're thinking about, well, you can call it whatever. But usually we are using X for the width as and height. Okay, anyway, let's not go there. The point is, okay, so we have called it image X and we're going to use our map function. So what exactly are we mapping? First of all, we are using in the for loop. So we are saying that starting from, you know, 0 all the way 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all the way to the whatever the width of the canvas is, you are going to map it, you know, the image to that as well. So we are going to use I. Of course, the two ranges that we are working with is basically the width of the canvas and then the width of the image, right? So that means that we've already mapped this value. What we need to now do is basically, we are going to use this method called get, and we're going to store that, let's say, this is what we will be using, right? So get, as the name literally says, this method is basically going to get that value for us. So in this one, as in terms of X and Y positions as parameters, we are going to pass this value here, and we're going to keep the value as 0 for Y, just because we are really working with the very first row of the picture, just to see first of all. Okay, and then because we need to pass this value, maybe it's a good idea to just put it in a variable. So let it be the color that we are getting basically from this image, right? So what we are saying is that use this get function, and basically whatever the value has been mapped, you're going to use it as the X position, and then, you know, get the color from that. And we're going to pass this C variable into our stroke parameter, which is going to create the stroke value, give the stroke value to the lines that we have created. Again, now that we are talking about A in the for loop and we are talking about lines, remember X1, Y1, X2, Y2. So our X1 is I, our Y1 is 0, right? So starting from 0, 0, our X2 is basically I again, because we are talking about vertical straight lines, and our Y2 is all the way to the height, right? So now if you can see, I know it may not, I don't know how much can you see, but there is of course a lot of gradation between blue and purple. So that's basically the first row of color that we are getting from this image, right? So we can do the same way, maybe not just like for one row, we can also do it all the way across for each of the row and column as well. So we can start and we can work with Y as well if we want to kind of make sort of some changes to it. So maybe it's a good idea to create another variable if we want to do that, and then map this one. In this case, we are going to map, if we want to make it a bit more interactive, we can always do that, like mouse Y be mapped to, you know, wherever our mouse's Y position is, you're going to start off from 0 all the way to the height, and then you're going to map it from image to basically 0 to image.height. Okay, so now we need to kind of pass this value somewhere, and we're going, basically, since we want to get it, we're going to use this variable and pass it on into our C function as well. So that way, so now if you can see, I'm getting a whole range of colors which are basically changing the whole sort of our canvas, right? There's a lot of colors which are kind of appearing in these lines as well. And it's also a bit more interactive as well. If you don't want to see anything at all, although I don't think so it's quite kind of that visible, but if you want to comment your image out, you can always do that. But yeah, so this is how it kind of works. So that way we were able to make our get something from our image and make it a bit more abstract and yet still have some sort of color instead of us creating a whole sort of like an array or a palette or something, but we could make use of it. Okay, so now that we have kind of worked with lines, we are going to try and work in a bit more grid structure and format, so that, you know, we can use again, we can get like some kind of values from the image, but then make it a bit more in a sort of a grid format. So how can we kind of do that instead of lines? A lot of those things are going to be similar, but since I don't want to disturb it, of course, I've, you know, created another sketch for it, which is going to get loaded soon. Again, so just because for fun purpose, this is a separate image, which I've already uploaded in our asset folder. If you want to have a look at it, maybe we can kind of see it here. Image 00 for now. Again, I've created the variable here, preload is there, and then load image where I'm pointing it out. And then here in the draw function, I have put it in the image method. So of course, this one is also sort of a little bit bigger image than the canvas itself. So let's start off from where we have left. I'm going to copy this because we will make use of this in somewhat, and we're going to build on top of that. So all right, so what we need to do in this case is, let's say, because we've already created lines, right? So if we are talking about creating a grid structure, we are making, we are working with not just the rows, but also the columns. That way, if we are kind of working with that, we are going to have a nested loop. And nested loop means that we are going to have another for loop within our previous for loop, right? So I'm going to literally pick all of this element. Sorry, all of this code here. And I think maybe this is just a bit better to see a bit more visually. Maybe I think I've done a bit more. Anyway, so that kind of works. So now we need to kind of, you know, we were going all the way in terms of width here in this one. The difference between this one and the previous sketch is, if you can see, that we were still working with the first row, but then based off on our sort of value on the y-axis, we were able to make some changes as well. So in this one, we are going to work with the rows and also the column. So let's just say let j is 0, and then j is less than height, and then j plus plus, right? And then we need to kind of map this value in this one instead of the mouse y. Let's just pass the j value in this one, and then the rest of the things are kind of there. So what we can do is, for this one, of course, this doesn't work. So we are going to make changes to it, and it's become a bit slow. I don't know if you guys can notice, but we are going to fill in the color that we are actually getting. No wonder this was happening. So let's just refresh this page first, and hopefully it kind of makes sense. Okay, so we're going to fill in this C value, and then we're going to use it to either create some kind of a circle or a square. And then what are the kind of parameters? Of course, I, J, which are for the X and Y. But then we need some kind of parameters in this one as well for the diameter. So maybe a good idea is, if we want them to be spaced out, I mean, we could do it if we want to start off with the point, but with the point, we can still use the I and J value, but it would not really make a lot of sense. Maybe, let's see, if we want it to be a bit more, let's say, let space be 10. And then here I will add. So what I'm saying is that instead of each and every pixel, go 1 pixel and then give a space of like 10 pixels, because we have arbitrarily given 10 as the value. And then move here, and then this one as well, right? So what we are saying is basically, once you start from 0 all the way going to the width, jump 10 pixels apart in the x-axis as well, and also on the y-axis, right? So here I'm going to use the same value just for fun's sake. And now if you guys can see, it's taking a bit long to sort of like load, but yeah, this is how it kind of works, right? And you could do the same thing, not just with circle, because we have kind of already created the structure, but you can also do it with square as well, right? So this way it feels a bit more like grid structure, like very pixelated sort. If you want to add some kind of interaction and add the value here, maybe to make it more interactive. So if the pixels you want to be bigger or smaller, maybe what we can do is work with mouse X, since it might be a little bit too much. So, okay, yeah. So if you can see that's a little too big, maybe we can also divide it by 20, or maybe you can do into 0.2 and that works the same way. So this way it doesn't go all the way big, but I mean, that's a choice. Like you don't have to do either or. If you sort of want it to be not taking up like a lot of like decimal places, a good idea for you could be to use our floor function. If you remember, that way it will get rid of the decimal points and it will give you out whole integers as well, right? So that way you can kind of work around with this. So either if you want to work within squares, or if you want to work with circle, right? So these are kind of getting big. And by the way, because I have already displayed image at the back, so you can see once you have those images, you still have something displayed. If you don't want it, let me just comment it out so you guys can see, right? So now if I go bigger right now, because it's just starting to show me whatever the background color is, and you can kind of play around with it. If you want, you can always do like a no stroke as well. So for instance, I don't know, we can kind of try to do that. If we do no stroke in this one, so this is how it kind of looks like, right? However, if you don't want to do that, let's comment this one out, and maybe instead of fill, you just want to play with the stroke color. So just outline of the circle, right? So that's a different kind of an effect that you can get. So basically you can play around with a lot of these. So if let's say, yeah, so basically what we've kind of covered is how to kind of work with image. We've used some different sort of methods, especially get, filter, and those kind of things, and just trying to make it a bit more interactive. Make sure that, you know, you are making sure that you are using your preload function so that the image is already loaded before the sketch begins. And then if you need any kind of help, you can always go back to the reference page and just check what are the things which are available for you to use, and then you can kind of manipulate it. One thing that I did forget to add on is that these all, we are playing with static images. So that means that we are not working with, I'm going to change this back. We're not working with GIFs. So if you want to work with GIFs, you can go back here. It's slightly going to be different. There is more documentation around GIFs as well. Generally, they are, I mean, they're images, but they kind of are like sort of moving because they have like lots of frames, etc. So it will be, because it's animated, so it's a bit different in the sense. But any kind of format when you are uploading an image works in the sense that like a JPEG or a PNG, etc. So I'll let you work with it and see what are the things that you kind of explore with these images. See you in the next video.